Welcome to the Lenora Williams Show. This is your host, Lenora Williams, your nonprofit guru, working with nonprofits for over 20 years, from startup to build up. And my co-host, Carla Thomas, journalist, community activist, and a nonprofit board member. Carla.
Good morning, Lenora.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Another beautiful day in the Bay.
Ooh, fantastic, huh?
Absolutely.
Well, I think I'm with you. It is another beautiful day in the Bay. We're having a good time. I can't believe our weather. Oh my goodness.
The fog rolled on in after 70-degree weather for like 3 or 4 days.
We were out there. I was around the lake. If no one knows, we're in Oakland, California, and we have a beautiful lake called Lake Merritt. It's in the central part of Oakland, and we live on the lake. When it's beautiful out, family,
everybody comes out.
The elderly, the handicapped, young people, everybody's out. And we just celebrate the weather. And it's so beautiful because it's really about community.
That's right.
Yeah, so here we are in beautiful California. A little overcast, but we can't complain.
No, we cannot.
So let's see. Our show is always about 3 parts. 1, nonprofits in the news. 2, education. Things we can tell you that help you run your nonprofit better.
Empowerment.
And lastly, how can you work with a nonprofit? How can you intern?
Gain great experience.
How can you decide if this is something you really want to do? And how can you give back to your communities?
That's what it's about.
So internships. So let's start out with nonprofits in the news.
Well, today we're going to start off on a scandalous tip. This is coming from the American Institute of Philanthropy, and they've got what they call the Charity Watch Hall of Shame. So we're here going to give you a little bit of the scandals going on in the world of nonprofits.
And this is really to talk about things you need to know so you don't do them.
That's right.
So let's talk about it.
All right. The first one is about the late Father Bruce Ritter, who founded Covenant House in 1972. And he created it to create a safer shelter for homeless teenagers. The organization had its humble beginnings in Ritter's shabby New York apartment, where he first began providing housing for homeless youth. He quickly grew into one of the most well-regarded charities in the nation. Ritter was called an unsung hero by President Reagan and was applauded by the first President Bush and Mother Teresa alike.
Wow.
But underneath all of this public acclaim, rumors had circulated for years of sexual relations between Ritter and residents of Covenant House, according to a report commissioned by the charity. 4 men stepped forward between 1989 and 1990, and according to Time magazine, accusing Ritter of having sexual relationships with them while they were under his care. Ritter allegedly diverted up to $25,000 in CH money to finance one of these affairs, according to Time.
Wow.
Isn't that a shame?
You know, I always want to start out with, you can't believe everything you read.
No, you cannot.
And I think the other thing I want to say is that perception is reality. Sometimes if enough people say it, enough people begin to believe it.
Right.
And that doesn't mean there's truth in it. However, the point for us is that you need to hear these things and you need to protect yourself by running an organization in a way that somebody is always watching.
Checks and balances.
And there should be checks and balances, and you should keep everything transparent. Everything transparent.
That's
so what
right.
else do we have?
We have William Aramoni. William Aramoni served 22 years as president and CEO of United Way of America. UWA, the umbrella group for thousands of local United Way organizations that fund social and human service projects nationwide. In 1992, Aramoni resigned amidst allegations that he siphoned money from UWA through spin-off companies he helped to create. Before the scandal broke, he was widely respected as one of the most influential nonprofit leaders of his time. He even had a hand in creating activities with certain residents. and made sexual advances towards certain members of the faith community extensively.
Wow.
Wow.
You know, I hate reading these stories. I hate talking about these stories, but the other thing is I don't want to bury our heads in the sand. We have to really acknowledge, especially when we have mixed sexes, men and women in organizations, and young people and older people in organizations.
They're vulnerable.
They're vulnerable. And we have to be mindful of that when we're running these organizations. We have to put checks and balances in place so that we safeguard and make sure that everyone is protected, the young person as well as the older person who's running the organization. Because reputations are important, but young people's lives are valuable.
Well, this other one is just a little bit lighter. It was a Ponzi scheme involving John Bennett Jr. He was the founder of Foundation for New Era Philanthropy. But unfortunately, the investments that he used from the nonprofits were nothing more than a Ponzi scheme. And it caused the organization to collapse.
Wow.
And they consider it to be the biggest financial scandal in the history of American charities. Victims lost $135 million to New Era over a 5.5-year period.
Wow. And we talked a little bit about this in one of our shows. And we talked about investments. And can nonprofits make investments on unrestricted dollars? Unrestricted dollars are dollars that are not tied to grants or don't have any, are usually fundraising dollars or dollars given by donors without any restrictions to them. Yes, those dollars can be invested. We talked about endowments. Endowments, when you have interest earned on those endowments, you invest the endowments so you can make money off of the endowment, and that money is used to run your nonprofit. But those investments that you make, you need to have it in investment policy. And you need to monthly watch and monitor the investments. And you need to have checks and balances on the people who are responsible for making those investments. So those things can occur when you don't have checks and balances in place. And nobody's watching.
That's
you must
right.
be watching. Everything you have, everything you expect, you should inspect.
That's right. Ready for another one?
I think so.
Okay.
Although this is making me kind of somber.
Yeah, it is, but we got to balance it out. We've bashed the guys. Now here's a lady.
Okay.
Lorraine Hale of Hale House. That was co-founded in 1969 by Clara Hale, a Depression-era widow known for taking needy children into her home and earning her affectionate title, Mother Hale. For decades, Hale House provided help for children touched by poverty, drug abuse, and AIDS. And sadly, Clara Hale's daughter and Hale House co-founder, Lorraine Hale, tarnished the legacy of her mother and the entire image of the charity when she took over the charity right after her mother's death in 1992. This lady, along with her husband, basically extravagantly spent. They spent like over $400,000 on a bronze statue, another $400,000 of an art collection that she used to basically refurbish her office. And the New York Times quoted her as saying, referring to the children of the shelter as cash cows. So that's, just horrible to hear.
It is horrible to hear, but I think, again, this is about who's watching. Boards of directors. You
gotta have checks and balances.
Your job is to oversee the nonprofit. Your job, by definition, is oversight. Executive managers, your job is oversight. The nonprofit is a business. And if it were your business, your private business, and it were your private dollars, you would not be so free to let someone just do whatever they wanted to do with them.
No.
And you should have the same concept for your nonprofit. Checks and balances, safeguards, oversight. All right, let's see what else we have.
Okay, we've got Roger Chapin He's a self-described nonprofit entrepreneur who founded more than 30 charities and advocacy projects over more than 40 years. His causes ranged from curing Alzheimer's disease to cancer and assisting veterans. Unfortunately, his track record often showed that he used his charities to enrich himself and his friends while spending too little on funding the causes he touted. The U.S. House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform subpoenaed Chapin in 2007 when he refused to voluntarily testify at its hearing on rampant financial inefficiency at many of the nation's veteran charities. He later was compelled to testify at a second hearing in early 2008. A congressional investigation confirmed that Charity Watch's previous findings that only about 25% of the $168 million raised between 2004 and 2006 by Chapin's veteran charities, which was Help Hospitalized Veterans and Coalition to Salute America's Heroes, went to veterans. During the same period, Chapin and his wife received $1.5 million in compensation, plus $350,000 to cover restaurant, hotel, and other expenses. And another almost $500,000 of charity funds were used to purchase a condo for his personal use. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame because, you know, I think when we think of nonprofits, we think about how people come in with their hearts and their passion and their love and their desire to help. And so in most of our hearts, when we hear about a nonprofit, we're thinking about those very things. And because we're it's like there's a glaze over effect.
Kind of like church.
Yeah. We just know. We know that nobody would do anything like this.
Right.
But
you go with your barriers dropped.
Yes.
When you're about passion, about giving and helping.
We have to remember, I can't say it enough, nonprofit, by definition, is a corporation. That's why you follow your articles of incorporation. Because you're a corporation. That means you're a business. And you have to treat it like a business. And when you treat it like a business, you'll put safeguards in place to protect yourself. So let's go into our topic, our education piece for the day.
All right.
And what is it? Compliance.
Rules, regulations, and best practices.
We talked about nonprofits behaving badly. Let's bring it up and give you some rules and things that you need to put in place, those safeguards to protect your nonprofit. So let's talk about some of the laws that exist.
Well, first off, there's the Nonprofit Integrity Act of 2004, signed into law by Governor Schwarzenegger, which became effective January 1st of 2005. The act requires nonprofits to have annual audits and creates new state and federal annual form filing. Scandals in the nonprofit sector received considerable media attention and prompted state and federal legislators to seek reforms like the Integrity Act to improve the accountability of directors and trustees of public funds, and also to strengthen the oversight of charitable organizations' fundraising campaigns.
Well, we just talked about this.
Yes, we did.
So, you know, it's time for government to start saying, wait a minute, these nonprofits are real businesses. We're going to have to put in some safeguards to not protect the government, protect the people they're supposed to be serving.
That's right.
So, the Nonprofit Integrity Act, this act requires nonprofits to do certain things.
Yes, it does.
Like what?
Well, they need to place on file with federal and state agencies the following: articles of incorporation, bylaws, names and addresses of all directors, officers, and trustees, annual accounting period, statement of activities in California, the first date the business began, and a copy of the IRS documentation letter. This information must be on file with the Attorney General's Registry of Charitable Trusts.
So, we are now saying not only are you going to tell us you exist, you're going to name and give us the addresses of the people that are on your boards. You're going to tell us when you were certified and qualified as a nonprofit. And you're going to tell us what your fiscal year is and when you begin. Why? Because we're going to track you. We want to understand where you are in the world, which is a good thing. So let's talk about how costly is compliance for nonprofits. Because there's a lot of new laws coming out, and we need to talk about costs. How are nonprofit agencies doing with adhering to the new federal laws? Especially in the area of health clinics. I don't know if everyone understands, but because we've gone to electronic records, if you go into your doctor's office now, they have their computer that comes up and they keep everything, and they'll tell you could sign into their website and you'll find all of your health information. You can see who your doctor is. You can talk to them directly about any concerns. That is a whole shift, a paradigm shift for health.
It sure is.
Hospitals, clinics, everybody has to be compliant with giving you access to your records. That shift was done by new laws that are called HIPAA laws and EHR, which is electronic health records. There is a requirement that every doctor seeing patients, no matter the facility, has to have electronic health records. So let's talk about some of the practices around just trying to bring all of this stuff in place. Now you have laws telling you what you have to do, and now you have to figure out how to do that. So we need to talk about, are there best practices? Carla, what are some of our best practices?
That's right. And how are you dealing with the cost associated with designing a good whistleblower policy?
And do you know that now when you create a nonprofit, you have to have a whistleblower policy in effect as a part of saying that you have your nonprofit opening the doors? You must have a whistleblower policy.
Wow.
And I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but I'll say what a whistle policy is. That means you have to have something that gives people the right in your organization to be able to say they don't like something and be anonymous. So usually the best person and the person that's going to blow the whistle on an organization is someone who's leaving because they don't like what's going on. And when you're leaving and you don't like what's been going on, you're probably trying to find a way to tell somebody about what's going on in the inside. That's considered a whistleblower. And a whistleblower is protected by the government. The government says that you cannot retaliate against a person who tells the story about what's going on inside of your organization. So, whistleblower policies are very important things to have in place.
And also, is nonprofit compliance with the growing number of new federal regulations even possible in our current economy?
Well, who's going to keep track of all the new laws? Who's going to keep track of what the requirements are? Who's going to keep track of the fact that there's a new 990? Who's going to keep track of the fact that Governor Schwarzenegger in 2005 changed the law and said this is what you need to have, called this Integrity Act? How would you know?
Okay.
Another one that's I come up against all the time is you can have your nonprofit and not use it. Right? We open a business, we thought we were going to do great things with it.
And it lies dormant.
And it lies dormant. Maybe a year goes by, 2 years goes by, 3 years, 4 years go by. But people don't understand that even though you're dormant and you're not doing anything, you must e-file with the state that you're in and with the federal government, declaring that you don't have any expenses. If you do not e-file your taxes saying zero, and it's a little postcard you send in, if you don't do that for 3 consecutive years, you lose your nonprofit and you have to pay the fee to reinstate it all over again.
Wow. So nonprofits are now being asked to have a deeper accountability by funders for every dollar donated, and fee-for-service income streams are not as plentiful as in past years.
No. And when it comes to nonprofits and compliance, new fiscal concerns are really surfacing.
I can imagine.
Well, think about some of the articles we just read. Those are fiscal concerns. How do you have investments and not know that those investments are not going into the pools and the pots and building your revenues? How do you not know that? How do you not know that it's a Ponzi scam? How do you know? I mean, you should know. There should be some kind of flag that goes up that says, wait a minute. We said we're investing $100,000 last year in this with this mutual fund, and we look at the mutual fund and it says zero. Nobody noticed that it's zero?
You better pay attention.
So the new federal compliance regulations are no longer isolated and centralized to privately owned and publicly traded corporations. Well, we know publicly traded corporations. We see those all the time. That's like we're looking at the airlines, right?
Right.
When you look up, we used to have, American Airlines, and we have American Airlines and something else.
Exactly.
We had United, now United and something else. So all the things we used to know are no longer the same. They're all diluted and bought out.
Everything is changing
Everything
constantly.
is changing. So there now is that those were the organizations and the businesses that the federal government watched all the time. But now nonprofits have come into their arena.
Yes, they have.
And they're watching them equally as closely.
Because in the past years, nonprofits were less scrutinized as corporations. But now they're being held to the standards similar to publicly traded companies.
Yeah. Nonprofits are now being held responsible for greater internal controls. And the consequences for having these controls in place, not having them in place, are significant. What we didn't say in the articles we read, we talked about things that happened, that people were behaving badly, but we didn't talk about
those orange jumpsuits
that a lot of nonprofit board members are wearing because of things that are done with funds that are not compliant. So now boards of directors really have a responsibility, or are held to their responsibility. And if they're not doing their oversight well, they can't say, well, we didn't know. No, the government goes after the board member as well as the executive management team. They share in the liability.
And they'll share in those orange jumpsuits if they're not careful.
Yes, they will.
So non-compliance can result in program shutdown during investigation periods, of course loss of revenue, and all those financial penalties, and in some cases, as I just said, criminal investigations and charges.
Yeah, I think here the key thing is when they come to investigate. We talked about all those things about record keeping your records. When the government comes to investigate, they take all of your files, everything with them. And guess what? You may be operating, and you have nothing to operate with. You want to look for your accounts payable files? You can't find them. They took them. Your accounts receivable, they took them. You have no way of tracking anything, and they won't give them back until they're done with their investigation. They don't really care.
And they're not playing.
They stop your operation.
The Department of Labor has begun to target nonprofit boards, CEOs, COOs, and CFOs for not complying with the newly created federal regulations.
I think in the last article, how much did they say in that Ponzi scheme people lost?
Wasn't it like $500,000, I think?
Yeah, so we're going to come back with some more compliance rules and regulations. So we're going to take a break. We need to hear some music for a minute.
Yeah. Keep this morning going.
Let's keep it going. While we're giving you good information, we don't want you to get uncomfortable.
Stay in the flow.
Thank you for tuning in to KGM1.com. And don't forget, check us out on tpng.biz, where we keep positive media #1.
If you'd like to be a part of TPNG or KGM1 Radio, if you'd like to be a radio personality, then send that to music director at KGM1Radio.com. Once again, that's music director, MUSICDIR, at KGM1Radio.com. Be a part of the movement.
This is KGM1 Radio. We're Team Zoe. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Team_Zoe and on Facebook under Team Zoe. You can also find us fellowshipping at 412 Pendleton Way, Oakland, California, 94621 at Zoe Faith Fellowship.
KGM1 Radio, keeping God message number one.
Lenora Williams, your nonprofit guru of The Lenora Williams Show. You're listening to KGM1Radio.com. Hi, we're back talking about that compliance stuff for nonprofits. Whoo! This is some heavy stuff, but really, please listen well and learn. I can't say enough that this is important stuff, and it's the stuff that we like to gloss over and pretend it doesn't exist, but it really has a major impact on every one of our nonprofits.
And now that the Department of Labor has begun to target nonprofits, boards, and CEOs for not complying with their newly created federal regulations, you really, really need to be mindful of these things.
Yeah, and we need to talk a little bit about health clinics. We started talking about it a little bit, but health clinics in our community, hospitals, they have more of a means. But health clinics exist in our communities in rural areas, in urban areas, in areas where there are underserved health needs for people who can't afford health care. Of course, with Obamacare, we're all seeing a new light to this. But even with that, you have to go somewhere to receive care, and usually it's your community health center. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Right. The nonprofit healthcare industry has good examples of increased costs associated with new compliance regulations. Expensive EHR, electronic health record systems for compliance purposes, are required for community health centers, with implementation dates as early as this year. Starting in this year, 2015, hospitals and doctors are all subject to financial penalties under Medicare if they're not using electronic health records. Wow. And some funding for EHR systems for nonprofit healthcare centers was identified by the Obama administration. It is not enough.
Yeah, it's interesting because now when we say we're changing everything for the patient rights, it impacts even the small business person.
Yes.
But in this case, it's a small nonprofit. And the question is, how do they deal with these escalating costs?
Right.
To be compliant with new laws.
Yeah, where are they going to get the additional funds to pay for the EHR?
Mm-hmm. And who will fund productivity loss? While the medical staff is learning the new EHR software and hardware systems.
And who takes care of the patients during the learning phase? And if you hire temporary staff, who pays for their time?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think about it, it makes sense. The things that we're talking about are not illogical, but they make sense.
Right.
But nobody gives the kind of support around making sure that these smaller groups that are taking care of the community that really needs their services
can keep up. So government grants were made available to a select group of nonprofit healthcare centers. The centers that did not fit the criterion for the above funding applied for available low-interest loans to be paid back from their dwindling revenue sources over time.
So how do you make low-interest loans? We love low-interest loans, right? Because we can say, okay...
Low or no interest.
Low or no, right. The key is no-interest loans.
That's right.
And that's called, what? A grant. Give us a grant and we can smile. But a low-interest loan saying that we'd have to pay this back over time. Even if you told me 10 to 15 years, who knows what the state of affairs will be for my nonprofit 10 to 15 years from now. Just like who knows what the state of affairs will be for our personal finances 10 to 15 years from now. So low-interest loans are a joke in some ways.
That's true.
So let's talk about EHR is closely tied to new HIPAA patient privacy regulations. So the whole idea of EHR is to give more access to patients.
And all the doctors involved with their care.
Yeah, and that, so before when you used to go to the hospital, right, I could go to Kaiser and then my health care plan changes. Right. And I'm now with Blue Shield, Blue Cross, but I'd have to write to Kaiser to send my records to Blue Cross Blue Shield providers so that they know what my history is. That's no longer true.
And they'd have to mail that pile of papers to the new provider.
Right.
Very mundane.
Very mundane. Now let's say that I don't have any health insurance, and now I go to the emergency room, and I don't have, the emergency room is not going to write to Kaiser to get my records.
No.
And so there's
complicates things even further.
Yes. So really it's about protecting the patient, but at what cost?
Everything has a cost to it.
Everything. And then the other cost in all of this is personal privacy, patient privacy. HIPAA is about patient privacy. So now you have my records. Just think about like my credit card. It's floating around. I go pay for something online. All of a sudden I hear that, oh, somebody hacked where I was making my payment. And everybody has access to my credit card. Well, the same thing could be true for my patient records. So there has to be all kinds of safeguards and protections around patient records.
And everything comes at a cost.
Yes, it does.
Nonprofit compliance costs are escalating. It costs to keep up with the new laws, it costs to create policies consistent with these new regulations, and it costs to enforce the new regulations, and it costs to educate staff, the board of directors, and on the ever-changing fiduciary rules.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to ignore the possibility of severe consequences for noncompliance. Fiscal consequences in terms of penalties assessed and possible criminal consequences for not putting in safeguards to protect against and prevent fraudulent activity from occurring are scary and costly.
Yeah, just think, if I'm a small business person, I'm a little community clinic, I'm serving a lot of people, I have to make sure that my front desk staff is as educated as my doctors on patient privacy.
That's right.
And now you could say, well, we always had to do that. But now there's records and access to that information where a receptionist somebody may come and say, I just need a letter just saying, that I was here. And they want to go and pull the patient's file and just type the letter and help the doctor out because the doctor's seen. Well, there's all this privacy. How much access do you give them to those records?
That's right.
So there's a lot more to this than just what we're saying.
That's right.
Let's talk about some sample compliance programs, because maybe there's some things we could put together, or people have put together for us, that will help us get through this. So there's 2 major compliance organizations that certify individuals in compliance. Now, who usually gets certified in compliance? You need to identify somebody in your small nonprofit that's going to get compliance information. That compliance information is information that will help you keep up with the laws.
That's right. The ever-changing laws.
The ever-changing laws. And this person will be trained on how to look for the ever-changing laws and how to implement them. So, those 2 major compliance organizations are HCCA, which is the Healthcare Compliance Association. They certify individuals on healthcare compliance.
And write down this website.
The website is hcca-info.org. The other organization is SCCE, Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics. This is one of my favorites. This is one I was certified under.
And write this one down. It's a long one. corporatecompliance.org. That's corporatecompliance.org.
These organizations are very equipped and training and understanding compliance, and the kind of training that individuals receive are invaluable. And they understand not just what's happening today, but how to research things for tomorrow and stay on top of things.
That's right. And it'll answer questions like, should you hire a compliance officer? And instead of having a lead compliance officer, you can form a compliance committee.
Yes.
And then the compliance committee can meet routinely, monthly, quarterly, or every 2 months, and could be staffed by a person who records the meeting. That makes it convenient.
Oh, of course. Because what do you want to have? We've talked about this before. You want to have a record of everything that's discussed so you can provide it at any time to any individual and educate them.
That's right. And then the compliance committee can conveniently report to the nonprofit's board of directors.
Now, why should they report to the board of directors?
Communication.
Communication, and the board of directors really hold
the responsibility
and the liability.
That's right.
For understanding and holding the organization accountable for operating within the guidelines of the law.
Okay. Orange is generally my favorite color, but when you get into trouble, orange would not be my favorite color.
We don't even want to talk about
jumpsuits.
it. We don't even want to joke about it.
So why do you need a designated compliance person or team? It's to identify and address compliance issues.
Let's compile compliance issues and group them in terms of urgency, because you can't tackle everything. And there may be a lot of holes that you see, but at least start to figure out what are all the issues, and then decide how you're going to tackle each issue.
Add some structure.
One at a time.
And then provide compliance training for the board of directors and employees so that everybody's on the same page.
And develop security plans to protect client-patient records. Security plans.
That's right. And conduct internal audits to find out what compliance issues may be lurking and embedded in routine processes and procedures.
Conduct internal audits.
Your own audit. Do not wait for them to come knocking on your door.
Or wait to hire a CPA and give them that task.
That's right.
You need to be on top of what's happening in your organization, and you should be able to self-audit. Next is conduct the following. Please conduct quarterly reviews. So you're going to do some self-auditing. Oh, you know what I noticed? I noticed that people are just running in the accounting office and picking up their paychecks, and they just go through everybody's paycheck and pick up their paycheck and leave. Well, maybe that is a compliance issue, right?
That's right.
Well, and then the other staff says it's not important because, most people have direct pay. Well, it is important because even if there's one employee who doesn't have direct pay, nobody should be sorting through the envelopes.
That's true.
Right?
That's right.
So, quarterly reviews, audit of all programs, then review audit results with program managers and directors and the CEO. Mutually decide due dates for corrective actions and follow-up reviews. Meaning, don't just say, we got a problem. We fixed the problem. You need to make sure you go back and review the problem was fixed.
That's right. And then there's 7 elements of a corporate compliance program.
So, here is a department called OIG. Anyone who's been in compliance problems knows that acronym, OIG.
It's too close to OMG. It's just a little too close.
Too close. Office of the Inspector General. Who is the Office of Inspector General? What power do they have?
The OIG conducts criminal, civil, and administrative investigations relating to violations of federal laws, rules, and regulations. According to OIG, comprehensive compliance programs at a minimum should include 7 elements.
7 elements.
To avoid the OMG.
And to avoid the orange suit.
There you go. Well, that's synonymous. Because when you're in the orange suit, you're OMG. Oh my God.
So let's talk about these 7 elements. And this is coming from OIG again. Why is it important to listen to them? Because they're the ones who come out and do the inspection and the investigations. And so they took the time to come up with 7 elements of protection.
To help you.
To help you create a good compliance program. Number 1, written standards of conduct, as well as written policies and procedures must be in place. Written standards of conduct, as well as written policies and procedures must be in place.
Structure, documentation, compliance, obedience, it all falls into place.
Number 2, designation of a chief compliance officer and or corporate compliance committee. Or if you're not a large corporation, a small compliance committee.
It's all doable no matter what size you are.
Yes. Please don't think, we're not big enough for that. We're only a 2-person nonprofit. You need to know the laws.
You're held to the same rules.
Ignorance is not a defense.
It's not an excuse.
No. Number 3, effective education and training programs.
Empower everybody in the group.
Everybody in your organization should understand compliance. Everybody. Number 4, a hotline to receive complaints and to protect whistleblowers from retaliation.
Anonymous.
There's nothing worse than going after a whistleblower and OIG finding out about it. Bad news. Whistleblowers are guarded by the federal government and all other agencies because you have a right as an individual to tell the truth. about what is going on inside of an agency.
And tell it on the mountain.
Yes. Go tell it on the mountain. Or whoever will listen. Number 5. System to respond to allegations of improper and or illegal activities and the enforcement of appropriate disciplinary actions. So, somebody could do something wrong in your agency. That's okay. The question is, what did you do about it?
That's right.
And how did you fix it? And how did you make it so it won't happen again? So number 5 is about figuring it out, fixing it, and putting in safeguards so it doesn't happen again. Number 6, audits to monitor compliance.
Internal audits.
Internal audits.
Check yourself.
Check yourself. Checks and balances. Make sure you know, before anybody else knows, what your dirt is. And fix it. Clean it up. You don't have to wait for an auditor to come in from the outside to tell you. You know. Be about the business of finding it out, fixing it, and cleaning it all up. 7, and last, investigation and remediation of identified systematic problems we just talked about, and the development of policies. I can't say this enough. I go into so many nonprofits, and they're doing wonderful work. And I ask them basic things like, where's the policy? Where's your personnel manual? Where's your accounting manual? Where's your policies and procedures for how you handle human resources? How you set up your payroll system? And then some of them will have them, and they created it in 1999. And it's 2014, 2015, and there's still 1999 on the outside of the sheet that says, this is our financial policies.
A train with square wheels.
And they say, well, we have it on the shelf. I go find it on the shelf, and you could like take the thickness of dust and dirt. You can see it. And it's like, well, do you know laws have changed since you put this together? And are you still using the same procedures? I doubt it. If I walked through this manual and tried to hold you accountable to this, I probably couldn't. Update your stuff. That's part of the internal audit. Go through your policies and procedures and update them.
And more importantly, write this website down. It's the OIG Compliance Guideline. OIG.hhs.gov/fraud/compliance guidance.asp.
Say it again.
OIG.hhs.gov/fraud/compliance guidance.asp. It'll make life a lot easier.
Yes, it will. And remember, they give you 7 elements. 7 elements. Not hard.
No.
7 elements of a good, comprehensive compliance program. Use them. It'll make your life so much easier.
So much easier.
So let's go into our last segment. Quick, because we only have a few minutes. We want to talk about internships.
We've got more internships.
If you want to work with nonprofits, if you're thinking about making a career change, if you just have a passion for something and you want to spend a little bit of time doing that within your community, we have some positions for you.
Yes, we do. We have one right here based in Oakland, California. It's the Responsible Sourcing Network. They have a project called As You Sow, and they're dedicated to ending human rights abuses and forced labor associated with the raw materials found in products that we use every day. So contact ASYOUSOW.org. ASYOUSOW.org. That is the Responsible Sourcing Network, and they're looking for a communications intern. And then you've also got a volunteer intern in their corporate affairs division for the, let's see, what is this?
Council on Foreign Relations
and Human Resources in New York. So you want to go to Human Resources at CFR.org. That's an email address for them. So there's CFR.org.
And we want to also let you know that if you want to look for some of these internships, you can go to the website idealists.org. So please know, let's give them some more. We have some more that's on our list, and we love to provide these because we're helping the nonprofit as well as you.
Okay, we've got a conflict minerals intern. It's a minerals initiative intern about responsible sourcing network. Again, at the As You Sow, asyousow.org. That's another internship they have.
Dedicated to ending human rights abuses and forced labor associated with abuse.
Yeah, products that we use every day.
Wow.
And then there's an online reporting internship with Yes Magazine. They collaborate with web editors and managers in all aspects of reporting, writing, editing, and posting articles. That's yesmagazine.org.
Where are they? Do you know? Oh, Bainbridge Island, Washington.
Wow. That should be fun. Then you've got a social media and marketing intern for Climate Store Inc., and that's out of Boston, Massachusetts. They believe in climate change, so they're a nonprofit startup with a mission to improve the environment.
Wow.
Then you've got a summer editorial intern for the Journal of Palestine Studies, and that's in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good internships. Please check them out, and please find something that really meets your passion, because nonprofits span the full gamut of services. They provide everything. Anything you can think of, a nonprofit is doing it.
And they're offered year-round. A lot of times they advertise for the summertime, but you can approach a nonprofit and see if they have slots year-round, because they're operating year-round.
And most of those positions, well, you would say, okay, I don't know if I can't afford to do internships, but some of these positions are paid, and some of the positions are stipend. So don't eliminate whether you'll get paid or not. Go for the passion and see if there are dollars associated with it, because they really need your help. So we have to close out, Carla.
Yeah, this has been a great show. Lots of information.
Yes, we started out with some really
hard-hitting articles.
Yes.
Some of them were just heartbreaking.
Very heartbreaking.
But it's the truth.
Yes, and we have to hear the truth in order to make change.
We want our listeners to be aware.
So, again, this is Lenora Williams, your nonprofit guru. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure bringing you information in the news, education, and ways to work with nonprofits. Carla, you have some closing words?
Oh, just do the research, be compliant, and just make a difference in the world. You are the difference in the world.
You are the difference.
Next topic, go to my blog at corner4nonprofits.com. That's corner4nonprofits.com. Or give me a call at 510-469-6264. That's 510-469-6264. Until next week, when we continue to talk about ways to start, grow, and keep your nonprofit compliant. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.